Mentioned when we started today, this is something we do every year as a congregation. We do a question and answer series that's based only on questions that you as a church ask. However, this year, we are doing questions that the kids and the teens asked. But like he said, a lot of the questions they asked are repeats or very similar to questions that I've been asked in the past. So, here's the question that we're going to talk about today. And yes, we have talked about this in the past as a church. Were Adam and Eve a part of evolution? And then some smart aleck in the youth group asked the related question of whether or not Adam and Eve had belly buttons. By the way, I'm going to give you an answer to that today, believe it or not. Well, you don't agree with much that I say, so yeah. All right, so here's the most important thing. This is one of those questions that Christian people can disagree about, which means that we can come to different conclusions. So what I am not going to do today is tell you what the right answer is. And let me just go ahead and tell you, teens, kids, sometimes this drives your parents bananas because they just want me to tell them what the answer is. But that's not what I want to do. What I want them to do is I want them to decide for themselves. And I want to help them do that. And if we end up disagreeing, that's okay. And I think they would tell you the same thing. Like about this question, you can make up your own mind. You don't even have to believe what mom and dad believe, really. They want you to figure it out. And so today what I want to do is I want to help you figure it out. This is a huge subject, and we only have one day, so we're really just going to touch on a few things. We have talked about this in the past, so if you're interested in this more, you can, I'll post like the old messages on our Facebook page, and you can go and you can listen with a lot more depth about the things that we talk about today. But at least hopefully we'll get you steered in the right direction of answering this question for yourselves. Today, the message is going to come in 3 parts. Not just 2, which has been the weeks previous. So, here are the passages in the Bible that talk about the creation of human beings, Adam and Eve. So these are the passages that are really the most relevant to the question. All right, for the first candy of the day, kids, you have seen these verses before, 2 weeks ago, when we talked about how God made human beings to be His image and their likeness. Kids, who remembers what that means? What did we say that means 2 weeks ago? If we are God's image and likeness, it's like we are God's what in the world? Who remembers? We are His children, so I'll give you candy for that. What specifically? The word image and likeness means something in the ancient world. It's like something today. What is it? You actually said it. I heard you say it out loud. Now you can't remember. Well, I'm not giving you candy for forgetting. Who remembers? Flag. We are God's flag in the world. Okay, right? So this is one of the passages in the Old Testament in Genesis chapter 1 about the creation of human beings. Here's the other one. This is from Genesis chapter 2. Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nose the breath of life. And the man became a living being. Okay, so in the first part of the message today, in trying to help you figure out for yourself what you believe about this question, we just want to talk about the Bible, and specifically the creation story in Genesis 1 and 2. Okay? Let's start here. Give me some facts. I don't care what they're about. Raise your hand and tell me a fact. It has to be a fact. Okay? My sister is the worst person in the world, not a fact. Oh, the Patriots are awesome, not a fact. That's a strong opinion, that is not a fact. I understand. What's a fact? Give me a fact, any fact. No. Get up, dude, one-track mind, no. Any fact? Okay, thank you, Ken, for the example. Nope, didn't make it. All right, so you get the idea? Give me a fact, anything. Huh? Who said one? I heard one. Raise your hand. Give me a fact, anything. 2 + 2 = 4. That's a fact. Give me a fact. Oh, see? There we go. Football is a sport. Perfect. Give me another fact. The Tigers won. Here, have a sucker. Give it to a kid. There you go. All right. Give me a fact. I wear glasses. Exactly. Exactly. Somebody else, give me a fact. One more fact. I question your education if you can't think of facts. Okay? Yes, you. That lollipop, okay, that's probably true. That lollipop is really crushed. Absolutely. Okay. So, here is a statement that is a fact. A princess is the daughter of royalty. For example, a king or a queen. However, sometimes we use words in non-factual ways, like to paint a picture, or in poetry, or to be a symbol. Okay? So, like this. I'm about to get my good dad points for the year. Shiloh, who for anyone who doesn't know is my daughter, Shiloh will always be my princess. Now, thank you. I know, right. Eli now hates me forever. Would you want me to call you my princess? Uh-huh. So, obviously, despite the fact that Heather thinks she's actually descended from royalty, she is not. So, Shiloh is not a princess. However, every dad in the room knows how you feel about your daughter, and you always will. That word princess, me using it in that sentence, is a non-factual, non-literal, symbolic use of the word sentence, or of the word princess. Sometimes we use other words like that too. Okay? So, kids, look at the bottom of the screen up there. I've given you 5 words. Can you use any of those words in a non-factual way? Can you give me a sentence? Okay, I'm going to help. All right? It smells like a dragon lives in Eli's room. That is a non-factual statement, however true it might seem. I warned you before the service I was going to do that, by the way. So, can you use, yes? My friend's breath smells like a dog. Exactly. That's a non-factual statement. Well done, my friend. I know, you're going to be perfect at this. Go ahead, pal.
The sky is falling.
The sky is falling. Probably because your room smells like a dragon lives in it. Uh-huh. All right. So my point in having you do that is, one of the key questions about the creation story in the Bible, in Genesis 1 and 2, is it trying to tell us facts? Is it literal, like a princess is a descendant from royalty? Or is it something else? Is it telling us something that is more like a poem? Or it's more like a symbol? It's telling us something that's not literal. Very important. I'll give you some examples from the creation story that make you think that we could have at least some of the bottom going on. In Genesis chapter 1, you notice that in the order of the days, the sun and the moon are created on day 4, which then leads you to the question, how do you know how long days 1 to 3 are if you don't have a sun and a moon? Or the light and the vegetation is created before the sun and the moon. How does the vegetation grow? if there's no sun to produce the light to help it grow. It makes you think that maybe it's not telling you only literal facts. So, what is Genesis 1 and 2 trying to say? Just facts, or maybe something else? And actually, the most important way to answer that question is this question. We're going to play a little fill in the blank because you guys did so well at it last week. So here's the blank I want you to fill in. When we think about the creation story in the Bible, how would the blank readers of the creation story have understood it? What do you think goes in the blank? Who wants to guess? If I give you more candy, you have to give it away. I know. Or save it for later, I guess. First readers, well done. Here. Okay, don't nobody get decapitated. There you go. Give it to a kid after the service. The first readers, okay? One of the things that people in our day are really bad about is they read the Bible, any part of the Bible, like they would. So in our case, we're people who live in America in the year 2016, and that's not who this was written to originally. This was written to people 3,500 years ago. So the key question here is, how would the original readers, the people 3,500 years ago, how would they have understood what Genesis 1 and 2 is all about? I did an entire message on this question a couple of years ago, so if you are interested in the long answer, just check it out this week on Facebook. Here's the Cliff Notes version. In their world 3,500 years ago, there were all kinds of stories out there, competing stories and explanations for how the world came to be and how human beings came to be in the world. Most of them involved crazy things that you think would sound like they're from a fairy tale. One of the most famous, the story of the creation of the world starts this way. It's in a story called the Enuma Elish. Mom God and Dad God are sleeping. The kid gods wake them up. And like all good parents, they respond by killing their children. I'm not kidding. And from the bodies of their dead children, they form the world. And eventually they get to the place where they form human beings in the world to be their servants, to be their slaves. In this story, they call human beings savages or barbarians, or you might even use the word aboriginals. People who are low, people who are uncultured, people who have no purpose in the world other than to do what the gods say. This is what the other stories about the creation of the world were like back then. And when you read the Bible story of creation up against those other stories, you see what it's trying to do. It is trying to tell you something very different about who God is, why He created everything, and how special human beings are. In the Bible's creation story, human beings aren't slaves. Human beings aren't barbarians and savages. No, we're God's flags in the world. We tell the world and everyone who's watching that He exists. We are His children. He loves us intensely, like a father does. If Shiloh is my princess, we are His princes and princesses. The Bible story of creation is really, the entire purpose of it is to tell something very different about who God is and the purpose of human beings in the world. This is how one expert on this subject describes it. His name is Dan Harlow. Quote, Genesis chapters 1 and 2 tells us nothing about the age or the size of the universe or about the physical processes by which either the earth or life on the earth developed. But it tells us everything about the supremacy of God, the goodness of God, the goodness of His creation, and the dignity of humanity. These biblical truths are timeless. Whatever you think about Adam and Eve fitting into evolution, what you have to remember is that's not the question the Bible is trying to answer. It is trying to do that. It is trying to tell you something different about God and different about us. That's really the point of Genesis chapter 1 and 2. All right, worship team, come on back up. We're going to sing just for a moment, take a mental break, kids and teens, then we're going to talk again in the middle part of the message about another part of how we answer this question. Part 2 of our attempt to help you answer that question for yourself. We're going to talk about maybe the two kind of big Christian options that you can choose between, okay? And in doing so, we'll answer that snarky little question on the bottom about belly buttons too, all right? So, here are probably, generally speaking, the two options you find out there right now within Christianity about whether or not evolution was involved in the creation of human beings. The first option thinks that those verses that I showed you a while ago in Genesis 1 and 2 are more factual or literal, that they're telling us exactly what happened, okay? If that tends to be how you think of those verses, then it leads you to this conclusion. At some point in the past, we don't know when, at least thousands of years ago, tens of thousands of years ago, maybe even millions of years ago, at some point in the past, the world existed, and there were fish in the sea, and there were birds in the sky, and there were all kinds of animals living on the planet. But there were no human beings at all. And at one moment, we don't know when, God created human beings out of the dust of the ground. The old church expression is he created them ex nihilo. That's Latin for out of nothing. He instantly created them out of nothing. You can imagine it like a River Kids project or a school project with Play-Doh. One day God has Play-Doh in his hands, and it's just in balls, like right out of the can. And God, in a moment, shaped human beings out of that Play-Doh to be what you and I know human beings to be today. So, by the way, if this is how human beings came to be, that God created them out of nothing, out of dust, in a moment's time, did they have belly buttons? What's the answer? Somebody want to guess? Yes? Right. If the answer, go ahead, Eli, what was your guess going to be? Yeah, no, why?
Because they weren't in somebody's stomach and they didn't have the umbilical cord.
Oh, nice scientific answer there, pal. Exactly. Other kids, who was going to say they didn't have an umbilical cord from their mom, so they probably didn't have belly buttons? Anybody else going to say that? I'll give you credit. Yeah? Who, where? I see a hand. There we go. Awesome. So, the only way they would have had belly buttons in this approach is if God decided that those things were decorative and decided to start the human race with an innie or an outie for no particular reason, right? But do you see why? Which is exactly what he did. Exactly. You have not seen my belly button. It would not be described, my friend, as decorative. So, this is option one, that God created in a moment, in an instant, human beings out of nothing. This way of answering the question about Adam and Eve and evolution has certain strengths. It, however, leaves certain questions unanswered. Like, how does that answer square with modern science? Some people would say it doesn't. We'll come back to that in the third part of the message, right? But this way of answering the question has weaknesses too. All right, so here's option 2. And you can come to the conclusion of option 2 if you tend to think that Genesis 1 and 2 isn't trying to tell us facts necessarily. Really, it's saying something more non-factual or symbolic. It's telling us things about God and human beings, but it's not trying to tell us the literal truth of what happened. If that's so, then you can account for the creation of human beings this way. At some point in the past, we don't know when, life started on Earth. We had the first single-cell organism. We will come back to that, by the way, in the third part of the message. And that single-cell organism evolved, very much like modern biology and science tells us. And first you had the creatures of the sea. Then you had the creatures of the land and the sky. And at some point, a particular kind of creature within the ape family, according to current evolutionary theory, really changed dramatically. A lot of it has to do with the way that human beings' brains are so different from the brains of lower creatures, even other gorillas and chimpanzees. And in that moment, maybe it took a day, maybe God was involved directly, maybe it took a process of time. But at some point in the history of the world, human beings became distinct, very different and unique from everything else in the world. We became moral. We knew the difference between good and evil. We knew that there was a God. We became spiritual. We became able to make choices and love others in a way that other creatures cannot. And at that point, we became human beings the way that the Bible describes them. We became God's image in the world, His flag in the world. We became His children at that point in the process of evolution. Some people who believe that this is how human beings came to be would tell you that this is the whole point of the creative process, that God started the creative process and the evolutionary process to get to the point where we would eventually get human beings, because human beings are the climax or the highest form of life that we know. Okay? If this is the route that you choose or the route someone else chooses, in this approach, did Adam and Eve have belly buttons? Kids, you can answer before the adults answer, although I will give them candy if they want it to. Kids, if this is the way you think it happened, did Adam and Eve have belly buttons? Yes or no? You have a 50-50 shot. Huh? Eli doesn't know. Somebody else. Yes. Sure. Why? Yeah, yes. Because they had a mom and a dad, right? According to this approach, the first human beings were born to somebody. So they had a mom and a dad. So yes, there was an umbilical cord. So yes, they had belly buttons. This too, if this is the way you think of it, this has strengths. Like it tends to match up with what science today tells us. This also has weaknesses, or it has holes. Like, okay, so when I think about those creatures who weren't humans becoming humans, it's hard for me to imagine about when that happened, or how that happened, or when they knew it happened. Like, when did they wake up and figure it out, that all of a sudden they were distinct creatures in the world? So it's not that this approach is perfect. It has weaknesses too, and it's okay. When you talk about hard questions like this, kids, by the way, this is often the case. It's not like your answer doesn't have weaknesses to it, which is why Christians can disagree so much. All right, so worship team, come back up. We're going to sing one more time. Then we're going to do one more part of the message that, in my opinion, is the most important part. We'll talk about why in just a moment. This question that we're focusing on today. And like I said a moment ago, to me, what we're about to do is the most important part of today. Here's why. So often when Christians talk about questions like this, where they disagree, what they focus on is the 10 or 20% that they disagree about, and they miss the 80 to 90% that they all should agree about or could agree about. I am so convinced of what I just said that I would tell you every single subject that you know Christians disagree about fit into that schematic. You know that, like, homosexuality, for example, is something that Christianity greatly disagrees about. Our denomination is in the midst of disagreeing about that. And our General Synod in a month is going to make some perhaps definitive decisions about it. Here's what so often goes on about that subject, just like this subject. And when we talked about it a couple years ago, we tried to put the emphasis in the right place. There's 80 to 90% of that subject that we all agree about. And we do ourselves in the kingdom and the body of Christ a disservice when we choose to focus on the 10 to 20% that we don't agree about. This is like that. So what we want to end with today are the things that we all can agree about, regardless of how we think God created human beings, how human beings got here, and whether or not evolution was involved. We're going to talk about 5. And we're going to do, again, because you guys did so well at fill in the blank last week, we're going to do fill in the blank this week. That last word should be world, sorry, not word. Spell check did not catch it. So here's the first thing that all Christian people can agree about when we think about human beings and where they came from, how they got here. Human beings alone, only, are blank in the world. What's unique about human beings, kid? Think it, you can actually, by the way, the answer is in something that we already talked about today and a couple of weeks ago. What's unique about us? What goes in the blank? Anybody? We are spiritual. Who said that? Oh, that's short. Nice catch, Candace. I'm trying to throw it higher so I don't kill somebody. All right. Yes, we are spiritual. That's absolutely right. We are aware of God in the way no other creature is. Good answer. Anybody else? Only some of us, my dear. Only some of us. That's about me, not her. Would you relax? Somebody else? Yeah, written language. Very good. Give that to a kid. There we go. Exactly. What else? What makes us unique in the world? What's the Bible say? What's the Bible's words, 2 words, that makes us unique? We've talked about them already. Do you remember? God's image. Here, I'm going to give it to your daughter, even though she should have raised her hand and said that. So, we all agree that regardless of how human beings got here, if we evolved to get here or if God made us instantaneously out of nothing, we all agree that human beings are distinct. We are very unique creatures. We're spiritual. We have written language. We alone are responsible for the care of the world. That's what Genesis 1:26-28 is about. We are the caretakers of the world. No other creature has that on their shoulders. We are unique. Regardless of how you answer the question of human origins, you need to preserve this belief. There is something special. There is something higher. There is something better about human beings. In fact, you could go as far as to say there is something not just spiritual about human beings, there is something divine about human beings. We are not God, but, like Psalm 8 says, we were made just a little lower than God. We are the creature most like God himself, in fact. Here's the other thing, though, that regardless of how you think human beings got here, you need to make sure that you keep intact. You need to make sure that you believe. So here's the sentence, fill in the blank. Human beings should feel blank to other animals. Who wants to guess at what goes in the blank? What do you think? Yeah. I see your hand, dude. But you'll always answer. Thank you for that. Somebody else answer for me. Yes. Superior. Good answer. That's true. We are superior. That's what we were just talking about. Here you go. Good. Good word. All right. And she caught it. First good throw of the day. All right. What else? Yes, Tessa. What's that? Humble? Okay. We should feel humble to other animals. Very good. There you go. Okay. Anybody else? Eli. What, I don't know. Should I give you candy for that? Dominant? I don't know. Yes. Special. We are special. Okay, this word may surprise you then. This is one of the key points of the biblical creation story. Connected. Okay, somebody say that? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you? Here, I'll give you candy. I don't know. It couldn't be as bad as dominate, so we're good. Yeah, we're good. We're good. Connected. Okay, has anybody ever dissected anything in science? Okay. In science, not in the woods behind the house. In science, I was very clear, dude. Okay? What have you guys, somebody raise your hand and tell me, what have you dissected in science? Kids. Eli, not you. Shiloh. Huh? A cow heart. Awesome. A pig's lung. Yes. A cow's eye. How creative. Anybody else? Yes. A shark. That's so cool. Awesome. Anybody else? Who's dissected something? A frog. There you go. All right. So in high school, at least if you went to high school in California in the Banning Unified School District, when you took anatomy or physiology as a junior, you would dissect a cat. I have a cat to volunteer, by the way, for this process. I will tell you, when we first began to dissect the cat, I had what I would describe as a spiritual experience as a 17-year-old. Because you open up a cat, you know what you find? Everything that's in you. There's a stomach. There's 2 kidneys. There's 2 lungs. There's a heart. There's a small intestine. There's a large intestine. There's a brain. There's a tail, which, okay, we don't have, admittedly. Okay? And if you were to look in a cow or a shark or all these other creatures you've dissected, you know what? You'd find a lot of similarity too. If you were to look at our cells underneath a microscope, you'd see a lot of similarity too. You know, the Bible, in its story of creation, points this connectedness or similarity out. And it does it through the name of the first man, whose name is Adam. For 2 pieces of candy, not kids, adults you may not answer, kids only you can. For 2 pieces of candy, I just put it up on the screen. This is like, I blew that. Yeah, that would have been hard. Hey, what's the first man's name mean? Who read the screen while I was talking? Okay, so, sorry, no candy. Adam, his name in the ancient language of the Bible means dirt. So, my son's name is Eli. I could have named him Dirt. Or Dragon, after who apparently lives in his room, right? But the reason Adam is given that name is because he is connected to the material out of which all other animals come. In the scriptural story, all other animals come from the dirt too. They all come from the Adamah, the ancient Hebrew word is. The point is, you and I should not feel afraid to sense some kind of connection to the lower creatures like sharks or cows or goats or cats or any other creature because God intended it that way. Now maybe you think, that evolution explains why there's that connection, or maybe you don't. It doesn't matter. The point is, the Bible wants you to feel connected to. So if we are spiritual and a little lower than God, it's also true that we have similarities to animals and all other animals around us. Now, here's another one. This is actually a quote from somebody very important in church history named St. Augustine. And it's a very important quote for you to remember as you go throughout your schooling and you try to keep your Christianity in place and you let your Christianity grow with you. Anybody know what should go in that blank? All truth is blank truth. Anybody know? Yeah, somebody point. Yes. Well done. Well, okay, now that one is worth 2. There's 1 and there's 2. Yeah. All truth is God's truth. St. Augustine said that, one of the first great Christian leaders and thinkers in the mid-300s AD. Here's the problem that often happens among Christians and in some churches. We think that science and the Bible are against each other. Well, no, not if you understand that all truth, truth from the Bible, and even truth from science class, are all God's truth. And we can learn about God through all of those ways. That's what Augustine is trying to talk about. Here's one of my favorite, really one of my favorite people that I've encountered in the last 15 to 20 years who's shaped a lot of my own thinking on this subject, but just a fascinating guy. He started his life as a scientist at Oxford studying astrophysics, so things like stars and black holes and the Big Bang and all that kind of stuff. As a 50-year-old, he decided, I'm tired of that. I'm going to go become a priest. And now he's an Anglican priest in England. His name is John Polkinghorne. This is what he says about how we as Christian people should view the relationship between science and religion. Quote, "Science and religion are friends, not foes, in the common quest for knowledge. Some people might find that surprising, for there's a feeling throughout our society that religious belief is outmoded or downright impossible in a scientific age. I don't agree. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that if people in this so-called scientific age knew a bit more about science, not just religion, than many of them actually do, they'd find it easier to share my position of faith." That's how you need to view science and religion. They are not opponents, they are allies. They are all trying to tell you God's truth. Regardless of how you think human beings got here, this sentence is very important to keep in mind. There is one unabashed miracle that all of us can believe in, something that I dare say no one can explain except through something supernatural or divine. What word should go in that blank? Every Christian agrees that blank is a miracle. Do you know what should go there? Life. Well done. You guys are on it today. Life is a miracle. See, one of the problems that some Christians have about allowing an evolutionary process into how human beings got here is they say you're taking the miraculous out of it. Well, no, what they have to realize is really the greatest miracle in the universe is not the emergence of human beings. It's how the first life got here. So at some point, if modern science is true, at some point everything in the world was dead. It was not alive. It was inanimate is the big word. And at some point, we had a single cell of life, maybe a protein, many think, that emerged. How did that happen? How did you go from dead or not alive to a live cell? Nobody can explain. Even scientists who are not Christians agree that one of the most glorious, mysterious things in the universe is how life got here to begin with. And really only for those of us who are Christians, God can explain. This is a guy named Francis Crick, who won a Nobel Prize for his work on DNA. And he's not a Christian. He doesn't even believe in God. But you've got to listen to what he says about this being a miracle. This non-Christian says, quote, "The deeper science presses, the more ambiguous answers become about the origin of life. An honest person, armed with all the knowledge available to us now, could only state, in some sense, the origin of life appears at the moment to be almost a miracle. So many are the conditions that would have had to be satisfied to get it going in the first place. Science, you might say, has discovered that our existence is infinitely improbable, and hence no less than miraculous." We can all agree about that. And in the end, this is what you have to remember. We all believe God blank human beings. We just disagree about how he did it. What should go in the blank? Eli? Made. That'll work. Anybody else want to give me a guess? Yes, Tessa. Created. That'll work. Exactly. Really, see, what we've talked about this morning is that all of us think God made human beings. The only differences that we have is how he went about doing it. You see that? On your chairs today, kids, is a summary of this last part of the message today, so that you can take it home and you can talk with your parents about any part of what we talked about today. But I'd love for you to focus on the things that we all agree about instead of the things that we tend to disagree about. We are now